Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hero's Joy podcast. My name is Sabrina. This show is an exploration of personal transformation and universal wisdom. Today's episode, we have an amazing human being and beautiful soul, Lauryn Taylor. I met her through a retreat 2 years ago, and she was able to stand up on stage and share her story of resilience and thriving through an incredible journey that really touched my heart when she shared it. She is a two-time cancer survivor. She's a musician, a music educator, and she's an advocate for growth. So I'm going to pass it over to Lauryn and see how she's doing and see what she'd like to share about her story today.
Well, first off, I'm so grateful to be on a Hero's Joy podcast. Like when Sabrina was telling me the idea and the purpose behind this, I was like, it just like resonates so deeply, and I think it's very powerful and impactful. But yeah, I'm a survivor. I was diagnosed when I was 18 and then relapsed when I was 19. And a lot of that just brought me lots of life lessons and helped me to expand how much I loved life and appreciate life. And now I feel like I appreciate every little thing, even if it's really tough. And so I really want to help people to do the same, like to appreciate the hard times as much as they appreciate the happy ones.
Thank you. Take us back to what life was like right before you heard about the diagnosis and then how things shifted from there.
Yeah, so I was freshly graduated from high school, and I loved my high school. I loved being in high school, so I was like kind of already going through like a big transition phase, like having to say goodbye to that. And I've always been somebody that holds on to things very tightly.
Mm.
And so it was a little scary even then. But yeah, I was a high school student, just graduated. I was getting ready to go to college. I had had my first like open house at my university, and things were honestly normal, like just very normal. I didn't really have any indicators that something was coming up until I just wasn't feeling well one day and went to the doctor, and it kind of just snowballed from there. And I was diagnosed about a week after that. So it was in the span of a week that everything kind of flipped upside down.
Oof, so fast.
Yeah,
I don't
it,
think I
it
was like
was really fun.
blindsided.
Yeah, yeah. We were also like moving from like from my childhood home to a different home. It's like all of it was just kind of like, all right, we're just going to change everything that you
Mm.
know and give you something new. And I didn't even know what to think or what to do or what to say. But it's one of those things where once it happens, you kind of just start to roll through the motions and you don't really have a choice but to do that.
Mm.
And so that's what started to happen, just started to begin treatment plans. Then I was admitted into the hospital and went from there.
Must have been so insane, especially how young you were at the time and in that transition where you're like ready for a whole new adventure and looks like you were given one, but in an unexpected way.
Yeah, quite a different adventure, but it was an adventure nonetheless. But yeah, it was being so young, I think in a way, being naive to what a cancer journey would look like was a little bit helpful.
Mm.
Um, I think I just went into it so blind to what cancer was. I'd never had anybody in my family, to my knowledge, that had it. Um, and so that I just persevered through that first battle with such like grace and such just sheer like I'm gonna just do this and it's gonna be what it's gonna be and it'll be okay. And I just like I can't even believe my little 18-year-old self. I have a lot of love for her because she just took it on like it was something that you just take on, as if it's like, all right, well, this is what it is. And
Wow.
then I think the second battle was different because I knew what to expect. And so that's when it really like broke down some super high walls that I was like protecting myself with. I was like, I now I know every step of this journey and I don't want it. So
Mhm.
it became a lot harder the second time knowing what was going to come my way.
I hear you. Let's fill in the gap between that first diagnosis and then the relapse. Like, what was that in between? Like, I know you said that you were so open and you were like, okay, this is just what it is. So you had that acceptance. I'm curious if you were like you always had that quality of meeting life as it comes, or was it more of a, oh, really?
No,
Oh.
no. I think I've always been, especially when I was younger, like very hard on myself and very like perfectionist mindset. And so I did not accept things necessarily the way they came. I feel like I kind of like I always appreciated life and like the small moments, but I definitely held like a vision, and if I wasn't achieving that vision, I took it personally and I was hard on myself for that. The in between time between first and second battle, I think I started to garner that acceptance that I hadn't had, and I just started to see life more like, wow, okay, I'm given this second chance. I need to like take it and appreciate everything and experience as much as I can. And I just became a lot lighter, and a lot more open and more like silly and goofy and not so reserved and closed off. But yeah, that in between time was, oh, about a year and a half, and I was just trying my best to get back to normal. But I think I always kind of knew something was coming back around because I would go through like phases of, oh, I feel like I'm sick again. And then I'd go to the doctor and I'd be fine. And they're like, no, you're all right. Like you're in remission, you're okay. But it was like months and months worth of just this back and forth of being afraid. So it was healing, but it was also like lingering at the same time.
Was it like an intuitive feeling, like you felt like there was something in the background?
Yeah, I think so. I think looking back on it now, I think my body kind of knew that something was still wrong.
Mm.
But back then, I think it was just like, oh, I just have PTSD and I'm anxious and I need to like move past this. But yeah, I think my body did kind of prepare in a way me for a second battle.
Were you at the time, what was your relationship like with your body during the first half?
That's a really good question. Like during the first battle.
And then if it was different as it went on.
Yeah. So I think, so like before my diagnosis, part of this like perfectionist like mindset that I was in when I was young was that I was not really in touch with my emotions. Like I was very like I would only feel them alone, and it was a hard cutoff. And this after my first battle, I think that's I started to become in touch with my body once I let those emotions kind of start to flow. I've always had this like intuition, like if I feel something different in my body. Like I know when it's something to be of concern, and I know when it's not. But opening up my emotions opened up a whole different level of awareness on like, okay, this bruise, like is that something to be concerned about? No, I'm okay. Or yeah, I need to like go get this checked out, you know?
So that awareness started to open up more and more as you got in touch with your emotions.
Yeah, 100%. Like a part of it is just like when you have a cancer diagnosis, you have to be hyper vigilant about what you're feeling because you have to report that to
Mm.
doctors and make sure that you're getting the treatment you need. But on the flip side, I feel like when I wasn't as emotionally open, I was closed off to other things that I was feeling physically, spiritually. Just like it kind of left a veil over my experience of life in general. And once I started to open up and feel through emotions, it was like a clarity around everything.
Wow, yeah, that correlation between emotional awareness and then also understanding the deeper layers of what's going on in your being, how
Hmm.
connected they are.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's an interesting journey because you kind of sometimes don't want to feel the hard emotions, the difficult ones, but feeling through those ones, that's what made me the most aware of myself, and not even like just how I'm feeling, but like who I am.
Tell me more about that. What else did you become aware of as you got more in touch?
Ooh, well, I would say I just became more aware of like the love that I have to give
Mm.
and also like how I can give that to myself. Like I was always like focused on loving others and loving the people around me, but I was never thinking too much about like how can I turn that inward instead of just projecting that outward. And I think feeling through those tougher emotions, I was like, there's a hurt person in here when I'm feeling these tough emotions and like she deserves to be cared for too. And it just gave me appreciation for like how much I can hold and had the capacity to feel through. And I was like, wow, I wouldn't treat someone else with as closed off as I was treating myself. So it just opened up a new relationship between me and me.
That's beautiful. It cracked you open to creating and cultivating a relationship with yourself where you're able to observe what was going on a more expanded way. Like you had more awareness, and then in that holding of yourself, you were able to give yourself compassion and see yourself from like this place of, oh, there's actually love here for me and to give to myself.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. That's like a beautiful way of putting it, right?
What were the emotions that came up more on the first half, and then if it was different on the after the relapse? Like, did you feel differently in the second half than the first?
Yeah, way different. So the first like I mentioned, it was more like a gracious like move through as it comes. But the second battle, I was so much more resistant to everything that was happening because I knew what was ahead of me in a lot of ways. And second battle is just a lot harder. Like that brought transplant on top of chemo rather than just going through chemo. And it also brought radiation. So it was just a whole different slew of treatment that I had to go through, a much longer process between like beginning to end of transplant. But that second battle, I think that resistance didn't it couldn't last super long. I had to kind of like just break down, you know. So I like really held it together through the first time, but the second time there was no holding it together. Like I was already tired from the first battle and I was tired from the news of a relapse. And so I didn't have the capacity anymore to like hold on to everything as tightly and keep it together as I was. And so I think breaking down and just like surrendering to this is just really hard and I don't want to do it again.
Mm.
And it would be easy not to try and to just give in to the illness. I think that is what forced me to kind of break down alongside breaking down those emotions was just like breaking down all of the walls that I kept around myself from being young to that point. So it like made me redefine, not like redefine myself in a different way, but like really discover what was under all of the protective walls I kept up growing up.
With each layer of you going through this process, it was like you're being broken down more and more and more, breaking down those walls. As you let go, as you surrendered, it actually opened up and gave rise to a deeper discovery of who you are from all the walls of protection.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I never really allowed myself to see myself because it was scary to open up and be vulnerable. But the second battle, like there was no room to protect myself because I just needed support and I needed to be vulnerable to receive that support.
What
Yeah.
would you tell someone who's in a similar position where they feel like at this point there's like nothing else to hold on to do, and they know that they just need to let go, but they're still like kind of gripping on? Like, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that it's scary and it's not supposed to not be scary. But the only real way to connect to what you need sometimes is to just let it go.
Mm,
And you don't know what's going to come ahead of you. But if you have enough belief in yourself and belief in what you've been given in this lifetime that you can be grateful for, like those are the things that are going to carry you through, even if tough things come from letting go. It won't be easy at first, but like the more and more you begin to trust, I think the more and more it becomes a little easier and free flowing instead of so rigid and kind of crippling.
Yeah, so beautifully said. When you accept the reality that there is fear and that it is scary and that it's not always going to be what you want it to be, and you like open up to that, whatever is here right now, then you create the space to navigate through it. And it sounds like from what you're saying, when you have that growth mindset, when you have that belief, knowing that there's something beyond where you are, it can really help you navigate with a lot more ease and grace and eventually flow.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's like you said, like it's so important, like what it's gonna bring to you. And yeah, I think it's a journey. For sure it's a journey. But one of the I actually have this like question that I wrote down. And so I would say too, like anytime you're going through a tough time, I think that this would maybe be helpful, but like you can ask yourself, how will healing from this contribute to who I am and how I live?
Wow. Say that one
And
more time.
so it says, how will healing from this contribute to who I am and how I live? And I wrote it down before we got on this call, and I think that it's like it helps to kind of focus on like I'm gonna heal from this thing and I'm gonna put my mind on the healing rather than on the tough nitty-gritty. And like you have to acknowledge and like accept the tough part first to be able to focus on the healing, but then kind of centering your mind on that healing, like, well, I feel like it brings it to you.
Oh my God, I have chills. When you can see yourself beyond where you are, it's almost like you're having a conversation with your body, with your cells, telling, like, kind of directing your cells where you're going, like what you would like to attract or step into, or creating the healing from the inside out.
Yeah, my nurse actually, when I was in transplant, so I received a stem cell transplant. And so she was like, tell your cells like to start building up your blood cells again. And it really is so true. After talking to you the first few times we talked, like you just have such an ability to connect mind and body. And that's something that I think is so difficult sometimes. Like you put such a physical importance with the emotion. And I think that that connection like just amplifies all of the like amazing things that come from that.
It's like bringing everything into coherence really helps to empower you in a much more like full way, because a lot of the conditioning from like my perspective as a woman, we can get really disconnected from our bodies and stay stuck in our heads just because it feels like safer. But once we start to actually bridge that mind body connection, it's like we have a greater sense of empowerment and feeling like at home and secure within ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like being a sense of home for ourselves, like is where that power to act and to live and to give in this life, like I think that's where that comes from.
Yeah. So going back to that question, I love that question that you added. What would you say is your answer to
Oh,
that?
didn't think about the answer. Um, huh. To kind of step into a little bit more of like a personal journey now, I recently just, post college, I've I know we've talked a little bit about this, but like figuring out what to do with life is really hard and something that's not kind of expected. And I think this question now might help me, but healing from the unknown and the pressure to create a life, I think will give me so much confidence. I think it'll give me confidence to know that like one, I persisted and found the job I'm looking for, created the life that I want, like step by step. But also, I think that I'll have appreciation for the patience
Mm.
that needs to come with that phase of life. And so it's kind of like a confidence from action, but appreciation and love from patience. And I think it'll help me to live more intentionally and with more like ability or belief in my ability to create my reality.
Oof, fire. That was amazing. And you're like, I don't know. And then you just like gave all that. It was always
Yeah,
amazing.
I try. I really.
That was amazing. It's
Aw.
like you gave a kind of long-term vision and then more of like the short-term present moment appreciation for where you're at. But like also being able to give gratitude for like the patience and every step along the way. And then also building belief in yourself and knowing yourself on a deeper level, knowing that you can create what you want to create in your life, knowing that everything that you've been through is feeding into your continuous evolution and unfolding.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and it really helps to have really to be surrounded by people that give the space to do that. That's why this like podcast is so incredible because it's those moments that like give the ability to articulate and to think in that way. And when you're not finding that support, it can be a lot harder. I think that I sometimes struggle to make space just because I think all the time, 24/7. And so those pockets of space, though, are like so important. I think it really comes from like just aligning with like finding that like you were saying coherence, even if you're finding a bit of coherence in something you're passionate about or you're enjoying your cup of coffee or the view from outside work or something. It's just that small little moment of alignment and coherence that those add up. And I
Yeah,
think that helps
absolutely.
to give space.
Mm. Creating space wherever you are, whatever you're doing.
Yes, that's huge. That's huge. Because sometimes you're in a phase of life where it's hard to create space, like you have a lot going on. But you can, like you said, find more frequency to create it in little moments, like it'll be enough.
Yeah. Uh, I noticed you use the term alignment, and it just reminds me of Elise and Ascend. Because I'm not sure if like we talked about this before, but I know you did Elise's alignment and accelerator.
Mhm.
Tell us your experience of that program and then how you ended up talking on stage. I was like, where does she even come from? This is crazy. I was just so
Yeah.
blown away by you.
Yeah, it was wild. So I signed up. So I've followed Elise since high school, and then I she came out with these programs, Alignment Accelerator, and I signed up, and it was all about 5 lessons or so that bring you through basically like a journey of connecting to yourself and aligning with your true self and highest self. So when I was going through it, I didn't realize how important really and impactful it is to share the journey with other people. And I've always kind of like moved through life. I mean, I've had such amazing people around me that have forced me to open up, right? In the best kind of way. But I always like experience things alone and try to keep it to myself. But Alignment Accelerator was a great opportunity to share going through these like lessons that she created with other people. We would be in a group and share our story and our emotions each week or each few weeks too. Throughout being in that program, Elise and I just kind of like had a little connection and we definitely were meant to cross paths. And at the end of the program, she asked me to do a testimonial for her, like for the website. And so I did that, but then a couple weeks later, she was like, "Hey, so like I'm hosting this event in California, and I would love to have you share your story." And I was like, let me just like process for a second. But I was like so on board, and yeah, if I hadn't opened up to that group about what I've been through, and if I hadn't been, I like just committed to being super vulnerable. I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do this, I'm going to share everything and not worry about judgment or not worry about sharing too much. And it paid off because then I got to share it with more people, and the feedback I've gotten from that has given me a lot of self-worth that I needed.
When you are vulnerable and detached from any outcome, but you're just like you said, you're committed to really just being honest and open and sharing from that place of truth in your center. And you couldn't have even foreseen what was going to happen from that.
Mhm,
But from that place, you had this inherent magnetism that drew in Elise, and she saw that in you, that created this whole string of events that really reflected back to you like a big part of who you are.
yeah, 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 and it's that's a huge thing, like, to have someone reflect back to you who you are and, like, be able to show you parts of yourself that maybe you don't acknowledge or appreciate as much as you should.
Mhm.
And yeah, it wouldn't have come if I hadn't kind of stepped into that commitment to sharing and to just being in touch with my emotions so then I can express it and articulate it to someone else.
Mhm. It's hard to take that first step of like opening up to yourself
Mm,
and even knowing what it is that you're feeling, even like being able to articulate the emotions, especially when um, you've come from a place where you haven't been in touch with yourself.
mhm,
And so the fact that you've come so far with being in tune, being connected, having the ability to express and articulate your experience and be so open and vulnerable is huge. And that's really, to me, like a representation of that hero archetype is like going into the depths of yourself, peeling away, letting down the walls, and discovering who you are underneath all of that.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. And I think that the hero archetype that you mentioned, like that's such a cool concept to kind of hold on to because it's for all of us. You know,
Mm,
it doesn't take having to go through what I went through to kind of develop all of those skills and beauties in within ourselves. And yeah, it really is so important. And there's something else I was gonna touch on. Oh, connecting to like yourself, the being vulnerable and having that in touch with your emotions, self to self kind of connection. Like it definitely is like I still struggle with it. You know, it's not like a one and done kind of situation. I definitely like still go through my ins and outs of closing off and having to being aware of needing to open up again. So it is like it's a constant in and out, but you're right, like it's just like an inherent archetype for kind of like a roadmap of getting back to where that space is.
mm. Yeah, it's like that universal representation of something we can all connect to and see ourselves in. But I love what you're talking about, the ebbs and flows, the ins and outs, that natural flux in life, that it's not always going to be victories and wins and like this thriving growth that's like all ups. In your experience, what has it been like, that up and down period?
A lot of it depends on like circumstance, you know, like what phase of life I'm in and what I'm experiencing around me. After such a diagnosis and such an experience, you kind of just hold on to one day I'm going to get back to normal. One day things are going to be normal. But then once you hit that, like there is no normal, but at the same time, I kind of have started to like forget how far I've come. And
Mhm.
so when I start to celebrate myself again and get back in touch with like done quite a bit, you know, I can give myself some credit here. It helps to get back to a flow
Mhm.
state instead of a a stuck state. But yeah, it's just a constant, like sometimes there's more highs, sometimes there's more lows. Building that foundation of like what you have to work with when you go through the lows, that's what really carries through until you get back to a state of being in more ease.
Do you have any tools or practices that you personally use to navigate that flux of life when things are kind of up and down?
Definitely who you surround yourself with for sure. Like people like you and having conversations like this help a lot to get back in touch with my core. Meditation has been huge for me. Yoga has been huge for me. Little moments. If I want to use like a teapot for my coffee instead of a mug, I'm using a teapot that day. Like
I love that.
it's just so simple, but it's like it just makes me happy, you know? But also like my self-talk. I think that is the biggest thing. Like when I am not practicing like positive self-talk, there's just like a cloud of like hurt and sadness, and it helps to really be like a sense of comfort and to know that like life happens to all of us. It's okay. Don't have to beat ourselves up over it. So I try to just be kind in my words mentally and in how I treat myself too, like not setting such a high standard. Try to
Mm,
kind of allow for days where I need to just do nothing and not push as much. You know, there could be a push day, but then there can also be a day of rest too.
absolutely. It's all of it. The human experience is, it's so vast that we have to make room for whatever is showing up to be, to just be.
Yeah, exactly. Like exactly. If that's not what brings the most happiness, then I don't know what does. Like simply just existing and allowing is really huge to living a more peaceful life, I think.
I love what you covered with creating an environment for navigating with a lot more ease and flow of the people that you surround yourself with, because you really do absorb and almost like acclimate to where everybody else around you is. So being really intentional about who you spend your time around, and then meditation and yoga, being able to create that physical, mental well-being on a daily basis. What does that practice look like for you?
Well, your meditation has helped me so much for
Oh,
starters. And on that one call that we had, like you put like shapes and like colors to what I was feeling, but not just like emotionally what I was feeling, but also like physically. And I was like, whoa, like it just connected and bridged the gap so deeply. So that's what I've really been trying to do since we talked. Like when I meditate, not just quieting my mind, but like feeling into each part of my body. And also, I've kind of developed this little system where it sounds a little strange, but like if I am trying to decide like big things or like need to ask myself something, I kind of like have this inner guide and nod, like ask myself the question. And if I nod and there's like no resistance in my body, I know that it's a go. But if I nod yes and there's like I feel it like right here and there's like a little knot, I'm like, oh, that's not a yes. Like that's a no. And I think the more I've meditated and asked myself those questions, but also had meditation that was simply being and simply sitting and feeling into my body, I've that like inner guide and like compass has really like heightened in the past year, even for me.
I love that so much. Like it's so important to know what truth feels like in your body.
Mm.
And when we're disconnected from feeling into our body and really having that like sense acuity, we don't know what is true for us, even though we do, but we're not able to really tap into it. So I love that method of connecting with the nod, listening, creating that like that connection with what does it feel like as a yes or a no, and then you start to pay attention.
Yes, yeah, and it's hard. Like at first, it was I didn't like get as strong of a feeling with that nod, but the more you do it and develop it, the more it grows.
Mm.
And sometimes just like asking myself those big decision questions, like I'm a thinker. So in my head, it's like I could have a yes as an answer, but then 2 minutes later, I'm like, well, but what if? Then it's a whole string of thoughts, right? But that body connection, like I trust that as truth instead of what's up here as truth. And so, yeah, you're right. Like, I think having that physical is so huge. It's so like impactful for what is truth and what's, kind of influences or worries.
Before going through your personal transformation with your health, and did you have that practice or did it come out of the journey?
It came out of the journey for sure. Yeah, I think needing to know how I felt physically for treatment's sake, like for making sure I was okay, communicating with my team of doctors. I think that started it too. And my mom is someone who we grew up always, me and my brother grew up always like having more emotional intelligence because she really pushed that for us. And so that coupled with the physical connection of what I went through, like needing to know my body, I think that's what developed it.
Like it sharpened it for you?
Yeah, yes, that's a really good term. Yes, sharpened it, like honed in.
I'm really curious what this whole journey has meant for you, like in terms of what you learned, who you've become.
That's that's a big question. I would say that for starters, like my connection to my family and the people around me has like exponentially deepened with what I've been through. One, because I saw their support for me, and I didn't realize how much I meant to people until they showed up for me in that way. Until, like, not that they weren't showing up before, but it's just different. So that was a big thing. My connection to myself, I think, is the greatest thing that came out of it. I just didn't have a relationship with myself before going through being sick. And now I feel like I'm my own best friend, and no matter what life kind of throws at me, I know at the end of the day, like I've got my back and I know I can get through it because the love I now have for myself is not going anywhere. And so I really wouldn't trade any of what I've been through. So as hard as it was, as like scary as it was, it brought a lot of things, or I took a lot of things out of it. My family, my friends gave me a lot of things out of that experience. It really became worthwhile, and it still becomes more worthwhile. The older I get and the more I go through, I'm like, it just all kind of accumulates into who I am now. But yeah, that self relationship is by far the greatest gift that I've been granted from that.
What would you tell someone who is embarking? Maybe they have no idea what to expect and they're blindsided by something
Mhm.
they were obviously not thinking of, and they're just hit with really life-changing news, and they're feeling a lot of fear, they're feeling uncertainty, they're like at a standstill. They don't know how to move forward or what to feel, what to think.
Mhm.
What is something that you would tell them? Any advice or wisdom that you would give?
Mhm. Mm. I would say a couple of things. So, one, move through the scary. Like, if you need to feel scared for a while, do that. If you need to feel angry for a while, do that. Whatever comes up, like, it's okay. And there is no normal, there's no right or wrong. You just need to kind of be able to feel it, whether that be giving yourself a space to feel it, a safe space, or finding a safe space in someone else.
Mm.
I would say to lean into your people, lean into what you do have, what you can be grateful for. That is really like the biggest and only way. Because what you do have and can be grateful for, when everything else feels like it's lost, it'll ground you. It'll keep you whole. Um, and also I would just say too, like, definitely allow yourself grace, give yourself grace, and try to celebrate like the littlest things, whether it's like you made an important phone call. Great, that was amazing. Give yourself like a little treat. If you like coffee, go get a coffee. If you like a certain TV show, like let yourself watch that TV show. Don't rob yourself of the things that bring you even the tiniest amounts of happiness because those really do add up. And the more you kind of can find happiness in the smallest of life's intricacies, like it'll be okay. And slowly you'll build back and you'll be fine. And yeah, hold on to that future vision of I'm all right. And I've got whatever it is.
Mm. Leaning in to what you have around you, giving yourself grace. There's a quote I got from somewhere that said, God is in the details.
Mm,
And when I heard that, like when I heard what you just shared, it reminds me that it's like whatever's right here is already so full of everything that you're looking for.
mhm,
And when we can like drop in into that allowing of the simple joys to fill us up, there's like this innate freedom that we can just receive, even in the toughest of times. And it's hard to see that when we're faced with like huge challenges and all the things that we can't control, which is a lot of things. But when we remember that we do have power over what we perceive, like what we're aware of, and we start to refine that awareness to the right now, the whatever's right here. Like you said, that's grace, that's peace and well-being that's always available.
mhm.
Thank you
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah, yeah, and even like and you too, thank you for sharing that because the way you put it is so just like it just resonates and I feel like it's easier to take in the way you say it. But even when you were talking about it, like you can that innate freedom. Second you said that it was like a I feel like we both kind of just like ooh, relaxed a little bit.
Yeah, there's there's so much pressure coming
Mhm,
from everywhere, coming from ourselves, and to the degree that there is pressure is also the degree that there is peace that's available too, if
mhm,
we know how to access it. And sometimes we overlook the obvious. I love the simplicity and the accessibility of the way that you explain like the joy that you can have. I was thinking before this call, we don't know what's gonna happen. A practice that we can all kind of tap into is what would it be like if this was like my last day? Like if we really don't know and there's no guarantee. And so even from your experience, you know what it's like to have that second chance, to feel like to actually see that life is a gift. It's hard to see that when we don't have that immediate pressure, that immediate like awakening moment. We forget how precious it is.
yeah, and it's hard to think about, but the more we do that, you're right. Like it just will put us in a mindset of seeing the bigger picture and the appreciation that you only have so much time to start appreciating what you have and what life is. And yeah, it's better to start earlier than later. And again, it's an ebb and flow, right? Like it's not like you decide to appreciate everything and you're set. You just
Mhm.
have to consciously every day treat it like, yeah, like you said, like it's your last. And yeah, it'll start to become inherent.
Like what you practice, you become. What you
Hmm.
how repetitively you become.
Yes, yeah, and I love to like it's important to make that a practice. Like I like that you put that into the word of practice because sometimes we think like, you have to be doing like yoga or like a workout and that's a practice. But like no, it could be as accessible, just appreciating life. That's a practice.
Yeah. Um, I'm curious, since moving through your personal transformation, where would you say you're at now with your own hero's journey? Like what are you facing in your life?
Hmm. I think I'm right now in a phase of transition. Like I'm kind of between what was with like being a student and what will be when I'm a little more like settled into how I want to show up in this world, like what I want to be doing. And I've felt very uneasy and just like not super grounded lately. And I think that it's definitely teaching me a lot though. Like it's helping me to see that I can act on a whim and like move through with flow even if I don't feel like there's ground beneath the flow. But on the hero's journey, I think the next step now that I have this like relationship with myself that's pretty like rooted and solid would be how can I share that and start to share the things that I've learned,
Mm.
not just, one like with the people around me, right? In moments like this, like in bigger scale, like on a podcast, on videos, but also like how can I do that in every conversation I have and every person that I meet. I think it'll be expanding into sharing. I've
Mm.
done like the inner work, a lot of it, and still doing it, but I need to get more practice in co-creating with other people and trusting that it'll pay, that it's worth sharing with other
Well, you're already doing it, and I'm in
people.
love with you, and I'm so grateful for you sharing your voice and your experience and your wisdom, and for being so open and honest and such a light. Like it feels so refreshing to even receive like everything that you share.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And like the way that you give space for me and for people to do that is everything. And it makes it possible for people like me to be able to share. That's why I'm so excited about this podcast. I'm very excited and grateful for you.
Thank you. I know that there's like a beautiful reason why we met, and the more that we connect, I'm like, okay, it makes sense more and more and more.
I agree. I agree. I think this is only just like dipping our foot in the water too.
Yeah. I noticed that you wrote that you had a store, like a clothing store called Always Love Being. I didn't
Yeah.
know that before. I was like, oh, this, and then I was like, I saw your website, I'm like, wow, like that's insane. Like, where did that come from?
Been it's been almost a year since we launched. My mom. So she going through being with me at the hospital, like she never left my side. And we had a lot of amazing organizations help us along the way, like Hell's Angels and Immerman's Angels. And so she wanted to find a way to give back. And so we started a t-shirt company, me, her, and my brother. My dad, of course, is involved too. But we give proceeds of the profits to the charities that helped us. So that's the main purpose behind it. And also our t-shirts are always like inspirational messages. And so it's just kind of like what you see in the mirror when you put your shirt on, like you want to start to believe it.
It's a beautiful way to give back and also to tie in a lot of the things that you were learning with
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
affirmations and the supportive self-love and supportive self-talk.
Hmm.
Version.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like an everyday way to make sure that you're like practicing those things.
Will that be like a big part of like your purpose moving forward?
Yeah, I think so. I think that that's like the start of the journey of helping people to see their worth and like to appreciate those practices. And I definitely want to begin to do that too, like with people like personally as well.
What was your connection with music in terms of like your connection to yourself, your personal transformation? How did that kind of tie in? Because I know that you're a music teacher and you teach piano and I think guitar.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, music has just always been like a soul like like a magnet to my soul. and just listening to music. Like I like wake up with songs in my head, and then I've noticed lately that like if I'm experiencing a certain emotion, if I'm sad, an encouraging like or sad song will come into my head, or maybe this is something everybody experiences, but music definitely gave me a space to like run away to when I needed to just feel through something. I kind of didn't always know how to do that on my own, feel through an emotion. And when I turn on a song, like it just automatically sends me into that emotion, like immerses me into the emotion I needed to feel. So I kind of use music a lot to help me process memories, process emotions, because it just is like a easy gateway into them. Where sometimes, like without it, yeah, I don't know entirely how to access some of those emotions if I'm like blocking them off.
Mm. Yeah, it really does give us that pathway to tapping into that subconscious emotional realm and like having the processing happen a lot more smoothly rather than like being stuck in our heads.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just like a shared experience. Like it, music just connects people in an unspoken. It doesn't have to be direct words, but we know what we're feeling together, like while we're listening to that song or that artist. And so I just find that to be so powerful. So yeah, it's the sole passion of mine for sure.
It really is like a universal language that we all share.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Exactly.
So how long have you been like teaching music and being an educator in that space?
Uh, It's been about a year and a half now. I teach mostly elementary school students, elementary age students, and then I also coach a band too. So that's been really cool. Yeah, and it's sweet to see like such they're so talented these kids too. Like it blows my mind. But yeah, I love being able to share that passion with them, and then to see them like celebrate like, oh my gosh, I got that chord. I'm like, good, you got it, It's just really cool to see that confidence build with every little step. I mean, sometimes it's a journey, right, to get kids to want to sit down and play, but once they do, like yeah, it is really sweet.
I can totally see you being an amazing teacher. I feel like you have such a confidence and patience, and also you create such a space for like that growth to just happen naturally.
Aw, I try. I hope that that's, yeah, what they're getting out of it.
Thank you for sharing. If this was the last thing that you could tell people about where you've been and what you've learned, what would you say?
Hmm. Wow. I'm gonna want to try to say like the perfect thing, but I'm just gonna say what comes to mind is that, and it's gonna sound cliche, but like love really is everything. Like if you can tap into what you love, who you love, how you love, there is no other, nothing else matters. It really doesn't. And that is the one thing that sustains all of us, that connects all of us, that keeps all of us. And I think if you're ever lost, like turn back to that and you'll find your way with everything else eventually.
I needed to hear that. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It felt like such a waterfall rush over me.
Aw. I'm glad. I'm
I'm sure
glad.
it's going to touch a lot of people too. So thank you for sharing your story, for sharing your light and your heart, and for being so open and real with us. I'm going
Aw.
to leave Lauren's information in the show notes. Um, you can find her on YouTube and Instagram and her website, Always Love Being. Please don't hesitate to check out Lauren. She's amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me this space. It means everything. Thank
Mm.
you.